Okay, so let's see what happened yesterday. So over a high time frame, the reason why I was taking so many shorts yesterday was because I've been looking for this trade for a while, and I honestly wasn't expecting necessarily this to be a deviation, this sort of move below 25.2. I didn't get any high conviction short signals because there were no consecutive daily closes under 25.2K. And as we saw last time, this exact move happened where we had this deviation and then just like the sharp move back upwards. But what I was really looking for was this sort of weak price action beneath, and we did get that for about an hour or two. We got this like sort of rejection, um, but we got continuous presses above. So price kept continuing to move up and pushing into resistance again and again and again, and even on an even more granular level, like this happened repeatedly. So like yesterday, like shorted around here was like a 1 or 2% move. TP partials here, and then just like got stopped out on the rest of the entry on ETH. And then I tried shorting it again last night around this time on this rejection up here from 25.2. But once I saw price move back towards entry, I had a pretty good suspicion that this would indeed break to the upside because usually when price consolidates below resistance for a while, but doesn't retrace that much going into the move up, I'm usually skeptical of whether or not resistance will hold. And as we saw last night, we got this huge spike, and this was something I was actually looking for a long entry, but we never actually got a sufficient pullback. So the reason why it wasn't just like an auto long for me was we never got so like usually these moves sometimes they result in deviations. Sometimes we can see something like this where we end up breaking to the upside and then just like barting back down. But in this case, that didn't happen, and we never actually got a clean retest. And I suppose in these situations, this is something you can actually design a break and defend setup where you look for the break of resistance. So like in this case, we look for this break right here, and any pullback, and and then once we pump again, you can actually just you can actually not even wait for the retest. You can actually just enter long and then just set your stop at that low, and it might even take several attempts. But on these type of trades where it seems to be a sweep of high time frame like support, you can actually attempt to trade this multiple times. Kind of like how I was attempting to short multiple times on the break of support. If you see a sweep and reclaim, you can try to end up like I think in these situations is actually a valid long on the pullback and then like setting your stop at this low. But ended up squeezing pretty hard. The level I was mainly looking for was this 25.8K level, and it indeed hit this level, but then showed some signs of distribution, but I never shorted because I want to make for more confirmation, and usually on these strong breaks of this sort of like high time frame support, or these like retested high time frame support, I never try to short the moves back up, especially if it's a really violent move. And ended up squeezing a bit harder and ended up tagging last week's high up here. Would have preferred to see a move towards this like 26.7K level, but didn't get it so far. Was a valid scalp short if you ended up catching this wick high up here. But I think this move is not necessarily done. Um, and I think if this continues to hold, so if this low continues to hold, I think we could see another spike up here where I'd be interested in shorting. But generally, not too interested in shorting on like higher time frames. I think if this move is indeed a strong move beyond this like 25.2K support, I don't see a reason why this doesn't go a little bit higher, especially off this like major level. This is like the biggest line in the sand. So I'm not trying to fade, at least for now. And if I do, then it's like very clean, very clear, like invalidation short. So I'm actually looking for longs on a few alts at the moment that are strong. So this is CAS, looking at BCH as well, but still short biased on most alts on higher time frames. But yeah, so that's a quick recap. I think generally I don't mind shorting the lows as long as there's clear invalidation and as long as you cut early. So this is something that most people don't understand how to do because they get caught with their pants down. Like right down here, as soon as I noticed this like support was breaking, or sorry, this was soon to probably break, I immediately cut the short. And I think there is actually a lot of value in shorting like sweeps of support as long as you understand what to look for in order to cut the short quickly, or as long as you have proper validations. Because I think people ended up shorting, but they didn't set any stop loss or didn't really look at the charts, so they got blown out all through here by spot bids. But as long as you actually are able to understand when to exit, then there's validity in shorting the lows. Because this is exactly what happened earlier this year, or like about a month ago, when we shorted, for example, like these lows right here, right? Like this 28.8K level had been a strong support level for a while. And as soon as I saw this breaking, and as soon as I saw this high time frame trend line breaking, started shorting here. And this was technically like a local low that hadn't been touched for like 3 months. But I knew that if this was possibly gonna drop even further, it would probably cascade. I didn't expect it to cascade this quickly, but this was like a strong like 10% move down. And this is worth taking if you understand the risks associated with it, and if you understand what to look for to cut the short. So if this started to press back into like support, or what was previously support around like 28K, then I would have cut the short for maybe like either break even or like a small like 1 to 5% loss. But you would have made around like 50% on any leverage if you would have ended up shorting this drop. So I think it's worth it in these situations, especially at these like major levels of support, if you end up catching it. But unfortunately, it didn't play out that way, and then ended up and he ended up pumping pretty hard back up without giving clean retests. In terms of ETH, so a reason why I'm mostly looking to short ETH in these situations, or I have been in the past, is if you look at these charts, let's look at this ETH chart, it's actually a lot weaker on higher time frames. So if you notice on Bitcoin, let me go back to the chart. So if you notice on Bitcoin, we set what appeared to be a higher high, or is like it was weekly a higher high. So like it was not exactly, it's not exactly a higher high, but it's like it's at least like wicked above like 31.5K here. And on ETH, there was no evidence of this. So I think it actually ended up setting a lower high right here. And in general, alts tend to underperform during bear markets. So, and especially on major drops, usually alts end up, I mean, especially ETH, but more importantly on most other alts like Solana, Polygon, etc. I'm pretty bearish in those in high time frames, and usually those end up dropping even more. Like if Bitcoin drops 10%, you can expect most alts to drop 15 to 20% or even more. So that's usually why I elect to actually short ETH in these situations, just because of the relative weakness that it usually shows. And similar to 25.2K, 1560 is the major level, this like yellow line that I've drawn here. This is the major level in the sand that I think that is comparable to 25.2K. So if we get consecutive data closes under here, we get some low time frame bearish price action, this is another short. And I think we did end up getting that, like I said, on similar to Bitcoin, we did end up getting some weak price action under here, but ended up continuously pressing against this resistance. So ended up cutting the short. But if we do end up, I mean, I'm not eliminating the chance that we do end up coming back down here. And if this sort of starts to happen, where we start to see some formations of lower highs, lower lows, and just like this acceptance below, then I'll be willing to go back into shorts here. But for now, I think I'm pretty neutral on Bitcoin underneath. I think given this deviation, I'm not particularly bearish in terms of like, I'm not convinced that we see this range like resolve back to the downside underneath this range, anytime soon. I think it's probably going to range even more. And I think with CPI tomorrow, I don't think taking any high conviction trades on this is a good idea. Maybe, like I said, maybe if we spike into this level here, this is the short trigger right here. But otherwise, probably not going to play this. And I'm actually looking more on alts right now. So I'm going to show a couple that I'm looking at. So with BCH right here, in general, the tip is for on BTC led rallies off high time frame support, you usually want to look for these betas. So BCH or STX are two of the strongest Bitcoin betas, and these usually pump the hardest off Bitcoin, pumps off major support. So looking for continuation here if we get it. So if Bitcoin actually does pump towards 26.7K, I'm expecting 210 to get tagged, and I have an alert set up here. So in the case that we end up seeing a reclaim, I will probably take a scalp long on this. So CAS is something that I've been looking to trade for a while. This is something that I traded for the past couple months successfully, and I did not actually end up taking this trigger right here. So this is something that I've been looking for, this purple box. I was looking for a retest of this purple box to end up long. And same with this, same with this retest of 0.033. This was something that, this was, if you zoom out, this was a high time frame level of support right here. And what I wanted to see was a market structure break. So I wanted to see, because oftentimes longing support blindly is not typically a good idea, because you could have longed at any period around here. You could have longed here, right here. You would have round tripped each one of them, or worst case got stopped out. So what I usually like to see for more conviction is a market structure break. So what this means is you want to see, because throughout this entire run, you saw this all-time high, but then you see, okay, this lower low, this lower high, this lower low, this lower high. This is the bearish market structure. So ideally, you want to start to see something along these lines where you want to see this purple box or this lower low actually start to get reclaimed. So in this case, this was actually a valid long right here. When you start to see this market structure break where you see this higher low being established right here. But I didn't end up taking the long because right around this time, you started to see a lot of the cartel pumps where the market would constantly pump and dump random alts, with highly negative funding. And you'd start to see these pump and dump with increasing speed. And when this happens, it's usually a sign of froth in the markets. And we saw the dump earlier, like yesterday, but it ended up being a deviation. But in any case, I had reason to believe that alts would show weakness, even if it was showing some relative strength prior to it. So I didn't end up taking this long, but it ended up being a valid long right here. Now sort of knocking into this resistance right here along 0.0427. This is the prior all-time high. So if we do see a reclaim of this level, I would be interested in longs. It is a valid short, actually, with invalidation at these highs. If we do end up seeing maybe another bearish retest similar to this, it is a valid short. So either direction, you can trade this at this particular level. But I would prefer to take this long given the momentum and given the prior relative strength. So these are the two primary longs. I'm also looking at render. For some reason, had been pretty strong today. I think there's some algo conference within the next week or two. Not exactly sure what's going on here, but there was some relative strength earlier today. So mainly just looking for this level to get reclaimed, 1.6. If we start to see some 4-hour closes above, would like to get long on this if this continues to show relative strength. But for now, it seems to have dumped, especially with, let's see. Bitcoin seems to be dumping right now. Yeah, so especially with... Yeah, so I think, like I said, that was a valid short right up here at this wick. Especially confluent with these highs last week. And if we look at the structure, looks like a potential 3 drives, or looks a little bit Barty. These right here, especially this wick up here, and the refusal to have any candles close with a higher low, right? Ideally, if you want to see something, if you want to see bull structure, you want to see something like this preserved, but it's not. So was a valid short. It's okay that we missed it. I think there's reason to believe that if bullish structure is maintained, we want to see the reaction right here at this level right here. Monday's high, we want to see some buyers here. Otherwise, another valid short below here. But yeah, so I think based on this price action, and I think Render probably sold off. Yeah, so Render probably sold off as a result of Bitcoin. Not really interested in trading this if this doesn't show relative strength sometime soon. Spell is something that I'm keeping an eye on. I think this was a cartel pump. I don't know if you guys were around during like the 2021 days, but this was one of the biggest Ponzi's back in the day. Somehow got listed on Coinbase, and the founder of this project has released a lot of other projects like Popsicle Finance and whatever. This has been pretty much down only for the past 2 years, but somehow pumped today. And zooming out, so like I can actually go through how I usually place levels. So this is a question that I've been asked before. Usually I place levels either at yearly lows or yearly highs, and there are some, like based on experience, there are some levels in the past that have proven to be important. For example, last year we got these like June lows off the capitulation. These June lows have been an important level, particularly for gap fill plays. So if you see like some coins, they end up like reclaiming these June lows. What is going on? Sorry, give me a sec. So if you see these reclaims of these June lows, usually you see gap fills much higher, and this was actually the case earlier this year in 2023. Once we ended up reclaiming once a lot of alts ended up reclaiming these June 2022 lows. So these are some levels that I've sort of designed on Spell, and I think this low is important as well. Served as support in the past at the tail end of last year. Served as resistance earlier this year. So if we see this level, and we start to see 4 hour closes, we start to see some retest of the support. It is a possible long, and I think there's a lot of people that got caught with their pants down shorting this. So it is a possible gap fill play, but I will eventually be looking to short this back down. These don't tend to sustain for very long, so within the next day or two, would be looking to short this, but in the meantime, if we start to see some closes above, would actually be interested in longing this as a gap fill play towards 66, but not particularly high conviction. Let's see, what else is there? Ape is a coin that have been looking at for the past year, have been short on this since like $26. Still have a short running on some of my old exchange funds. This has actually just been down only. It's literally at all-time lows as of the past couple days. And this is an example of a coin that, of an alt that you really should have no reason to ever buy, especially on higher time frames. And this sort of fits my thesis of most alts. Most alts, I believe, are actually going to trend towards zero, and there's no reason to hold them on any long-term basis. And if you look at the market cap, so for example, if you just look at like the market cap and how many coins there actually are in circulation versus the fully diluted value, the market cap is 420 mil somehow. This should actually probably trade much lower than this, but the fully diluted market cap is $1.1 billion. So there's like 70% of the supply that still hasn't been released yet. And there's actually an unlock within the next week for this coin, which is why this has been trading so weakly. But in general, like over higher time frames, has been very weak in general. But I see this, people will tell you that, oh, it's already down 99%, like how much worse can it get? It can get a lot worse. And I think this could eventually trade back to as low as like 50, 30 cents. I'm not trying to make price targets here. But what I will say is that for a lot of these coins, these are actually great high time frame shorts if you end up getting entries on them. If there's any sort of like narrative or catalyst or whatever that ApeCoin somehow has, or if there's some, if there's some GameFi or like NFT related narrative and this somehow pumps again, this will be a great high time frame short to hold for. You can hold this for years because at the end of the day, it is not necessarily inevitable that Bitcoin or ETH ever pump back to new highs. But what probably is inevitable is that a lot of these coins, a lot of these useless like vaporware alts, end up trading and trending towards zero. So holding these high time frame shorts is actually much more rewarding at the end of the day than holding Bitcoin and ETH longs. And most people are bullish in this space, so they don't have, they won't tell you this. Or maybe they just don't realize this. But at the end of the day, like if you're in this space to as an opportunity, or as a means towards an end, to make money, you have to be able to look at things objectively. And at the end of the day, this is a useless project. It is not actually really. There's no utility here. The tokenomics are bad. There's not really much of a narrative. So looking at it objectively, this is actually a great short over high time frames if we end up getting it. But I wouldn't short now because the unlock is happening within a few days, and it's probably going to pump within a day or two, either before or after, as things usually do. So I wouldn't short going into the unlock if you already haven't been. But this is something just as a general principle to be aware of. Similar with DUI/DUX, so there's a major unlock where they're basically doubling the supply in December, and this is something to keep an eye on. In particular, this sort of high time frame trend line, or if we somehow pump towards these daily highs around 2.33, would be interesting to short here. But in general, looking for this high time frame trend line to break, and I think this eventually retraces all the way back to 1.4 potentially. Oh, and about TRB. So I gave a tip on this earlier in the Discord today, but this is something that is actually pretty much free money if you have the right execution. So I'm not sure how much background you guys have in funding, but essentially, how futures contracts operate in general is that perp prices actually operate on a different price scale than on spot, and how they actually end up achieving some sort of equilibrium between perp and spot is by incentivizing shorts and longs. So if there's a lot of people shorting or longing on perp, so for example, a lot of people are shorting, then the price on perp is usually a lot lower than on spot. So they actually try to achieve an equilibrium by incentivizing people to long, and they do so by the funding rate. So the longs will actually end up paying the shorts if there's an abundance of shorts. And they will pay them on and in this case on TRB, they're being paid on a 1% basis every 8 hours, which is actually a decent amount of money. Like a 1.5%, 2% basis is a decent amount just for holding. And so people are incentivized in this case to long. And if you look on lower time frames, right around noon, so noon EST was when the funding reset. And right here, there's a huge dump. And this was something I noticed on LPT when I first took longs in it a few weeks ago. So funding has usually been negligible, right? Like funding in previous instances before these cartel manipulations, funding was usually around minus 0.0%. It would be very negligible. So there wouldn't be enough incentive for people to end up longing something or shorting something just to receive funding. But in these cases, when funding is minus 1.5 or minus 2.5%, there's a lot of incentive, especially there's probably a lot of bots that are arbitraging this sort of thing. So bots probably longing into the funding settlements, and as soon as funding settles, bam, you see this drop. So if it's the case that funding is highly negative, price is in a general uptrend, so on a higher time frame uptrend within let's say a few hours prior, and especially if price is pumping low time frame into the funding settlement, this is actually a free short, right? This is pretty much a 1-2% move within 1 minute. So I actually ended up taking this short as a back test, and I had tried this a few times prior just to see if this was a consistent thing, and it has been. So this is a free alpha. This is literally free money within a minute. I made 8%, and this happens every 8 hours, especially on cartel coins. So I think TRB is still being heavily shorted. It's still in a general uptrend. So the next time, so within 7 hours from now, this is something to look out for. And I will probably send a signal out just before I short this. So this
Brandon,
is something to look for.
Can I add a point there? Or do you
Of course.
want to keep going?
Keep going. Go ahead. Of course.
the other thing, the other point part of that mechanism at play is there's a lot of people holding shorts on like 10x leverage, and when the funding's negative 2.5%, they're about to pay negative, or they're about to pay 25% of their position when that funding resets. And so a lot of people are are actually fleeing out of their short positions, generating the short squeeze. So yeah, the bots are longing into it, and so are we, but it's also people literally getting squeezed out because if you're on 20x, you're literally paying 40% or something insane.
Yeah, no, like a lot of so I think it's like bots are dumping at the funding reset, and then people are getting squeezed out. And then once this happens, usually within a few minutes, it actually achieves like the equilibrium back up. So it is actually possible long once most of the longs are squeezed back down. But it depends. I think that's a riskier trade than simply just shorting the funding reset if the conditions are right. And I would take these trades a little bit smaller. Like I wouldn't go too crazy with the leverage, but this has generally been working. But yeah, besides that, there hasn't there haven't been too many other coins that I've been particularly interested in. Let's see. I mean, somehow YGG is pumping, but other than that, I think these were okay. Actually, I'll cover Solana real quick. I didn't get a chance to cover it, I don't think. So this has been a hot topic from a lot of people, especially on crypto Twitter. Funny enough, Solana is actually almost down for the day. So Bitcoin's up like 3%, and Solana is actually down. Um, so this is something that, zooming out, there's absolutely nothing bullish about this chart. I think there's, if you zoom out, there's just so much supply, and so much supply that is either locked or owned by VCs or owned by FTX that there's no reason to believe that this, is a good long-term hold. And I think you're going to have to get a lot of the supply out from the people that are owning a lot of it. You're going to have to see capitulation of some sort. But even then, alts that have performed well in the past and have become Dino coins, right? There's so many bag holders from $100, $200, even like $40, that it doesn't make sense to hold this on higher time frames. You're better off holding some of the newer coins that have released. And I think there'll be a lot of people. There's a guy named Z on Twitter, like his Twitter name's Ansem. He's very bullish on this coin. I wouldn't fall for the psyops. I think it's very delusional to think that this coin ever achieves all-time highs again, much less achieves like a 4 or 5x over even like the next couple of years. And I think this is actually one of the best shorts in the market. And there's a lot of people trying to say that they're expecting a squeeze. I don't think so. I think just because they're shorts doesn't mean that it's inevitable that they get squeezed. Like just because there's bait doesn't mean like people will end up taking it, right? And I believe that this ends up trading back towards 15 or even closer to like 13 over the next year or so, or even in the next few months. So as I covered yesterday, some of the short setups I was looking for on this is if we end up getting some sort of bearish retest to $18, wasn't super clean, but I think if we end up sort of holding below $18, this is a short. So continuously looking for opportunities here. This wick was a good opportunity to short right here. This is probably actually like a small short squeeze wick. But in any case, even if there are short squeezes, I don't think they're going to be as violent as people think. Like this is probably not going to suddenly like pump towards $20. So I'm looking for shorts on this. I think it's it's lower conviction than ETH shorts because this doesn't generally follow Bitcoin as closely. And this is probably manipulated by a lot of people who are selling, who have a large stashes of this, or just market makers who are trying to squeeze out random shorts here and there. But I think this is probably, this is one of the alts that has the most correlation to Bitcoin, but is up the least today. So definitely something worth shorting and keeping an eye out for this particular trigger. But other than that, I think ARB is something that people are discussing as well because this is also, was at all-time lows over the past day. What the heck? Okay, so if we zoom out a little bit, this is something that was airdropped to a lot of people over the course of the past year. Has been pretty much down only since, right? Like higher time frames, we got this high, but we got this, lower low, lower high, lower low. We end up getting this equal high over here, but then and this equal low, but now we're pushing towards these lower lows right here. So generally pretty bearish on this. Could see a squeeze, at some point towards 0.9, but unlikely. So I think this is something that I'm also interested in shorting on higher time frames. So if we zoom in a little bit, was looking for a trigger like this. So if we end up, it did end up deviating above right here. If this proves to be deviation, and this ends up trading back below 77 cents, we'll be interested in shorting this back down. Since this has been trading so weakly, right? Like as soon as this 90-cent low was breached, it has literally just been down only. So it's been down like, about 18% since this low was breached. So this just shows that there's huge amount of supply that people are just continuously dumping. Once all-time lows are breached, there's virtually nothing in the way of this, dumping even further down. So would be interested in shorting this back down if we get this trigger. But that's most of the trades I had lined up. BLZ is something interesting to look at, but have not even traded it once. Have been simply observing. Price action on this has been kind of crazy. I'm not sure about the funding right now. I can go check, but I'm pretty sure it was still negative last time I checked. Let's see. Yeah, it's still minus 0.4%. Not as severe as I thought, but this is something that has been in general uptrend. Not super interested in shorting this as of yet. But if we do end up getting this classic cartel pattern, where if we do see something like this, where we see this slow grind up, consolidation, and then perhaps one final squeeze, and then immediate retracement, this is when I'd start interested in getting shorted right here. So I will short right here. Usually this means that it'll start trading down only. But until we get that pattern, unlikely to short this, and I'm even long biased as long as you hold above 13 cents. So, but still unlikely to trade this because this has just been very scammy in both directions, but has been a general uptrend, so wouldn't short quite yet. But that's all the coins I have lined up for today. Feel free to ask any questions. If anyone has any questions or wants me to cover any topics, happy to cover them. But yeah, feel free to chime in.
One thing to add for a confluence indicator on what Brandon said, I'm curious what your thoughts on this as well, is normally after we see that last wick up or breakdown on short entry, we see that wick up to sweep highs on lower volume. I don't know if that's something you observed.
Sorry, are you talking about like cartel coins or just in general?
Cartel and generally.
So like lower volume, so like just like illiquid, just bids just getting hit.
So if you see like, I guess normally we used to talk a lot about efficient versus inefficient moves.
Yeah.
And when we see like that slow grind up on higher volume or in volume building on a what normally is like looks like a cartel TWAP.
Yeah.
We see that sometimes we'll see a wake up into liquidity, a pullback, another wake up to sweep the highs, but you'll notice almost every time before the breakdown, the volume on that last wick up or on that sweep is almost always pulled back lower.
Interesting. Did you notice this in perp actually?
Definitely, yeah.
Because that's something I was looking at a few days ago. So established this high, like grinded against this high. So this is what I was talking about, the classic pattern of like this sort of like, really, really big rally up, consolidates here, tries to form another high, but almost immediately retraces, huge dump, and then just down only. So I think, let's see. So you did notice the volume here was significantly less. On which like exchanges? Was it just like on perps, on Binance, or like what in particular?
It's across the board usually, but you can normally see it on like Binance perps or Nexi perps.
Yeah. No, that's a good tip actually, because a lot of times people will short too early, or because people were probably trying to short this the entire way up, but I think you just basically, I think the main thing to look for was, that really inefficient move up on lower volume, and then the immediate wick back down. right? This like 10-15% wick back down, even more than that actually, probably like around 20% move back down. That's probably the signal short, and that happened on Cyber as well. It's kind of a slow grind up, and then some wick higher, and then immediate retracement, and then down only. I don't know if this will persist though. I think these cartel market makers are getting a little more sophisticated, so their strategies have changed. Before it was like a huge scam wick. So I think before, for example, on like Tomo, this is something we observed where, or even on like for example, Lena, like a really long time ago. Might even have to zoom out more. Yeah, so right here. So on Tomo, this like huge move up, literally like 500% move. Final squeeze. So on this day, it actually literally squeezed from like $1.44 and immediately hit like 2.5 and then immediately retraced. And then from there on, it was just down only and it just like went all the way back down. So another like, 30% drop. So that's another possible short. But the cartel has changed a lot. So like that used to be the strategy where it would just squeeze immediately and really hard. So it would take out all the stops and then down only. But in recent times, it's changed a lot where the squeezes aren't as dramatic. Same with Lena. Lena just like up only, and then squeezed all the way up here, and then just down only ever since. But yeah, so I think there are certain strategies that we can employ, and like there are certain things we can look at, but these are always subject to change, and we have to kind of adapt based on what we're given.
Does the dumping that we're currently seeing on BTC kind of update your thinking at all on the market, or does it just seem like kind of not really to update you relative to where you were, which seemed like it was kind of agnostic to bullish?
Yeah, I'm mostly neutral right now. I mean, there are some bullish and some bearish signs at the same time, like the sweep and reclaim, and then strong move back up is bullish, but I think higher time frame context is still bearish, and I also think that as long as we stay beneath like 29 to 30k, yeah, this high time frame structure, like I'll pull up a cleaner chart. Like as long as we stay beneath this like 29 to 30k level, this is not particularly bullish. And in fact, like if you zoom out even further, like all of this, like if we end up like just ranging like in like around here this entire year, this looks more and more like a BART. Like this looks more and more distributed before move lower. So I don't see any of this price action as particularly bullish unless we start reclaiming this level and then we start like forming higher highs and higher lows. But until then, I still cannot be bullish on higher time frames. So, and on lower time frames here, this has not necessarily changed my perspective. I think the moves up were a combination of like spot-driven short squeezes, and I think that this pullback is natural. Like right here, like if we end up like right at this level right here, this like 26k level, I think this is the natural level to retest. So if we do pump, I think it should be from here. This level should hold, like, or at the very least, like we could sweep again and then like come back up. But around 25.8k should hold for more upside. And if we do end up jumping beneath, I think this is actually low time frame bearish, and I think we do end up seeing retracement all the way back down here. But on these,
wait, when you said 25.8k should hold, do you mean conditional on that holding, look for upside, or do you mean you're like expecting 25.8k to hold?
Oh, like so it should hold for upside. So I'm not saying that it should hold in terms of like, oh, like it will, or like, because I don't do much predictions. Yeah. So generally, if we are to be like bullish on low time frame upside, this level should hold.
Got it.
And I think in particular, if we actually zoom out to what happens on retests of major high time frame support. So almost each and every circumstance where we see these major high time frame levels retested, or like we see like deviations below and immediate reclaims, a lot of times these are actually very quick moves up with hardly any retraces. So right around here, for example, in March of this year, deviated below 21.5, looked pretty bad, and then immediately touched this trend line and then sent, and then reclaimed the level, did not really give a proper retest, and just kept sending. Similar to here, on this retest of 25K, deviated below, swept, and then had this kind of like slow but grindy price action, and then like kept going up and up and up, and then really strong green candles up. So if we are to see this level hold, we need to see very, very strong price action. And we need to see, usually these won't give clean retests. So like this is already a little bit, I mean, this is fine, I guess, and I wouldn't even be surprised if we end up seeing a retest lower, as long as this holds. But in particular, I would like to see 25.8K hold. If this doesn't hold, maybe this level, but this is like still the do or die level. So I think in the past, for example, on the prior move around 25K, we actually did end up seeing this retest of exactly 25K. Yep. So right here, if we zoom in a little bit, we see right here, so the deviation below, and then it traded above for a bit. It hit like 25.8K and then like retested and then kept sending. And it was looking slightly distributive here, but then ended up grinding right into resistance again. So this is what I mean by like consolidation below resistance. So like right here, this could be interpreted as distribution, but at the end of the day, if we see, so like you see this red candle, valid short somewhere around here, but as soon as you start to see price slowly grind towards this resistance level again, this is when you should start leaving shorts. And if as you saw right here, completely blew past resistance, retested one last time, and then just sent. So I think we do need to see a strong move above 26.7K, reclaim this level, and then send, and that's for further upside. So short term, want to see 25.8K hold, and at the very worst, 25.2K. And if that doesn't hold, then we're back down to the lows. But those are sort of my thoughts.
Got it. Thanks. That's really helpful.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think it's not particularly bearish, even if we hit this level, as long as this retest is clean.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, feel free anyone else to chime in. Otherwise, we can start to wrap this up.
Just a quick question: what exchanges do you only use MEXC for shitcoins?
I use MEXC for the challenge account I'm currently running. So, I mean, for trading shitcoins, you should probably just buy them on Uniswap or something. And I think you can actually trade perps on MEXC for some of these shitcoins. Right. But I think MEXC is a decent exchange. Like so far, it's actually, in my experience, the execution is much better than on KuCoin. It's just perceived as a lower tier exchange because it simply doesn't have the reputation of KuCoin, but I think it's fine. Like so far, haven't had any problems. Have not had any problems withdrawing or depositing or anything. So, and I'm pretty sure they're solvent.
So you
Yo,
use
Brandon,
KuCoin?
I'm actually in talks with Mexi right now to be able to get an account classification with priority order flow. Um, Obviously, I'd love to share that with the group when that comes through. And
Hmm.
then the other thing to note on Mexi versus something like Bybit is your taker fee on swaps is 0.01%, where it's 0.05% on Bybit, usually depending on your tier. So if you're on 10x leverage, that's 0.1% to open or close your position, and on Bybit that's 0.5%, which obviously adds up a ton.
Right. No,
So
that's a great
depending
tip.
on
No,
how
I
much,
would appreciate that. Yeah. Let me know.
yeah, cool.
Sorry, did I answer your question, or like, did you have anything more to add?
Oh yeah, I mean, basically, I just wanted to know what exchanges you use and kind of how you navigate withdrawal limits. Might be a real noob question. Um, sorry, so
Yeah. So like before with KuCoin, I was KYC'd, so like I would actually be able to withdraw without much like limitation. But then they started cracking out on KYC, and particularly if you were like a U.S. citizen or Canadian citizen, they don't allow you to KYC anymore. So even though like I can technically still trade on there, I just thought it wasn't worth the risk, so I like withdrew everything from there. And now most of my funds are actually on Mexi, and I'm not KYC'd on there, so it takes like a long time to withdraw funds if I am going to. But I don't have as much money like on there anymore in terms of like percentage to my net worth. But I think that's like only concern if because I think you can still withdraw like how much is it, like 10 Bitcoin a day now or something, like 5 to 10. I forgot what the number is on KYC. So you can still withdraw like a sufficient amount for most people's purposes per day, even if you're not KYC. So I think it's still a viable exchange. Another exchange that I used to use in the past and might even use now is like Femex. I forgot about their fee structure, but Femex is something that you don't have to KYC as well, and generally is a pretty decent exchange. They used to not have that many selections of coins, so that's why I prefer Mexi because they just have more coins. But like Femex is something that is also a viable option for U.S. citizens. Otherwise, if you're not in the U.S., you can just use Binance or Bybit or something like that.
all right, cool, thanks.
Yeah,
You don't run into withdrawal problems with or limits with Femex?
I haven't used it recently, so I actually don't know. But I think the withdrawal limits are actually less than Mexi's, I believe, but it shouldn't be that much of a problem. And I did use them in the past, like I would say about a year and a half ago, and I didn't have any problems withdrawing. So
Cool,
yeah.
thanks.
Mm-hmm. Also, before we wrap up, I was just looking at this chart real quick. The reason why, um, so a lot of times, so I got a question in the past about like understanding what to short in terms of okay, like if we see Bitcoin, if we see a viable short setup on Bitcoin, should we take it on Bitcoin or should we take it on ETH or should we take it on Solana? Like, what should we take it on? And usually, it depends. So, for example, this is not necessarily a an indicator that works every single time, but if you start to see ETH BTC, so this chart which represents like um, the relative strength of Ethereum, if we start zooming out, and if you start to notice that this chart is hitting resistance, it's actually a more viable short than Bitcoin at different levels of Bitcoin resistance. And sometimes this works the other way around, where let's say like if ETH is actually performing very weakly on lower time frames, so if it's like very weak strength wise compared to Bitcoin, you actually might want to short ETH instead. Um, but in general, if you see a move up into the supply on ETH BTC, it's generally advisable to short ETH, especially if you're doing like a swing short of some sort. Um, and if if there's a move down on Bitcoin, at high time frame support, where like let's say high time support is breached, most of the time it's better to short ETH or other alts because these usually receive the brunt of the move down. But so it's like it's very contextual. I would say like it depends on the price action that you observe on lower time frames as well as on higher time frames, like where ETH BTC is at. But generally, if Bitcoin is trading weekly against alts, then you might want to short Bitcoin instead on lower time frames. Otherwise, in most cases, I actually like to short ETH. And also, I think ETH usually has both cleaner levels as well as like has been trading as a weaker asset, as a weaker beta to Bitcoin for the past like year or two. But yeah, so that's like a question that I wanted to address before we wrap up. But if there's not any other questions, we can go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks everyone for coming. I appreciate it. Hope everyone enjoyed and found this useful.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. This is great. Love it. It's good to get everybody on.
Yeah. Oh, I just actually noticed another question about funding reset. Why not long into the funding reset? Yeah, you can do that. You can long into the funding reset if the funding is very negative, but you have to be careful about it, and you have to I think you have to observe low time frame price action just beforehand to see if there's like a slow grind up, and if you see it, and like I think it's just harder to define invalidation. I think the short is easier to take because you can more easily define invalidation at some sort of local high, but here it's like if you're longing, it can be tough, and especially if market actors become more sophisticated, if they start noticing this drop into like going into the funding reset, it could get a little bit dangerous. But it is a viable it is a viable trade you can take long into the funding reset.
The
Yeah,
PvP mode that I've observed is there's a wick down to liquidate a few people,
yeah,
and then it grinds up, and then the move up really starts about 7 minutes before reset is when the squeeze gets going.
yeah.
And then if you do not exit more than 20 seconds before the reset, you are going to get fucked when it dumps.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that dump is brutal. It's literally like 1.5–2% within a minute, but it's great for short.
Yeah, and you need to give the exchange a few extra seconds to execute your order because sometimes they stall or go slow because they get bombarded when on reset times.
Oh yeah, because all those bots are probably selling, so it's just a lot to take in.
And people have priority order flow and we don't.
Oh yeah, no, let me know about that. That'd be great if we can get it.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah. But yeah, just noticed that question before we wrapped up. But yeah, there's nothing else. Thanks for everyone for coming out. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yo, thanks.